And just for formalities, we have a four-member team here this morning. Myself, Miramar Opsal, the Chief Financial Officer. We have Apisalome, is our team leader in license, and we have Samu, our senior regulatory analyst, with our public service and regulation department. We also have Razik, our senior technical officer. I believe you're very familiar with Razik. And we're happy to listen to your presentation this morning, Iliki, and all is yours.
Naka. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Khan. Thank you. Margaret, thank you so much for making this happen. Thank you so much. Value. I'm just gonna a few. I think since I'm hosting, yeah, I'm gonna keep this recorded. If that's okay with you all. Okay. We just we've got this small Qaqi Mai society that I like to keep in the loop. We've started since we began the journey, so I like to keep the team in loop in whatever we discuss. So I thought I'd keep the recording, so I'd make it available to the team. You know how team works, so we could always be on the same page. If that's okay with you guys. Nice. All right. So I am going to be sharing screen right now on my small presentation, and I hope that you bear with me. Entering screen share now. Okay, so Qaqi Mai bike share. If you can see it on the screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can see it.
Okay. So our campaign is basically traveling green and clean. Our problem, I guess, the Land Transport Authority will be well versed with this particular problem amongst many others, but we are focusing on the traffic problem. The idea came about back in 2019 on how we faced a lot of, and I guess it's a continuous problem. And in having to think of a way out, a solution to the traffic problem, we thought about introducing bicycles. And the forte on having to get to work late, school late. These were amongst the few pillars of what we found as something that we'd be able to solve the traffic problem. Our solution is very simple. We're introducing bicycles to our community. And let me just go back there, sorry. So these bicycles, these are smart bicycles. You get to them by using an app, or just like how we have our bus cards. We'd like to introduce bicycle cards. Same means that you tap and go. There's a lock right here. There's a lock at the back of the bikes that keep them intact. And I guess this model has been utilized overseas for years and years. We're not reinventing the model. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're just adopting the best of what developed societies have been doing, and we're trying to get that across. And we thought this is going to be one of those solutions, getting bicycles on our routes. Huh? And in having to do that, a small brief about where we started back in 2019. We forecasted this. We had a good chat with Chief Fiji Roads, Mr. Kamal. Oh my goodness, to actually hear the forecast of Fiji Roads in having to lay out bike plans, bike lanes all across the country for that matter, and the shared mutual vision of having to go with our 2050 global emission reductions of carbon. It's just one of the many reasons we are getting to move on with this one. So we established partners in 2021, having to go first with the Ministry of Economy. We later hopped into the Suva Municipality Council. We had a little chat about how we could make it work and having to give us a basis where we could start off. And as COVID came about, we faced a major challenge, which is part of why we future-proof. We're still future-proofing how we're going to do it. Why it's the best time to do this? Because we have the technology and infrastructure already available to make it work. As I mentioned before, the targets and of course the means of having to do this is so much dedicated to how much developed countries have done so in their different countries and in their different municipalities. They've made it work. And I've always shared when it comes to pitches in organizations, NGOs, statutory bodies, there's one of the biggest advantages as being developing countries, is the fact that we get to adopt these models that have been refined, tuned to the stance and to the standards that overseas countries or developed countries have been doing so. So it's a model that works. And that's one of our biggest reasons amongst the rising cost of living, the traffic congestion, that we've got to dive deeper to understand that not only are we able to actually tackle the traffic problem, but we'd be in line having to get our contribution towards our national SDG agenda, the national development goals, the sustainable development goals. We got to see how this could only affect as much as reason one, but it could be somewhat our contribution to the nation and how we could do it together. And that's why our target markets, and as any startup, we'd understand how it's very difficult to raise capital. It's very difficult for us to actually get the know-how in resources wise, in capital wise, to do this. That's why we're targeting the tourism industry first. I'd like to make this clear because the tourists and hotels and hotspots, tourist hotspots across the country, and we're basically thinking of having to start it in Suva. And why this is important, because we'd like to raise capital from here on to focus our mainstream target, which is the general public. And in having to do this, we'd have to start from somewhere. Think big, start small. Our second target market are eco-friends, namely expatriates, namely those that are more in tune with how green transport works and how they've been utilizing it from their different areas, different communities, different countries, on how they'd get to ours, and they'd see that we have options available in having to make this work. And of course, as I said, our ultimate goal is having to get this available to the general public. And we'd have to do this by starting somewhere. Now, we all understand that the market size is huge. We have around an 80% market size. And most of this that we get are normal traditional competitors, which I'll hop onto in the next slide. But these are bus and car transportation systems. And of this, we've identified that we've got a 60% serviceable market available to our needs, to our standard operating procedure. And of this, realistically, in being a startup, in having to make this work, we know that we will need at least a 50% serviceable market to obtain this. And that's why, in having to look at the competition, we generally see bus operators, taxi operators, and normal vehicle owners as direct competitors to how we're going to make this work. And of course, in any new growth, in any new development, in any new chance that we get to introduce something new, there will naturally be this sense of traditional competitors. And that's how we see Qaqi Mai in its stage off the ground to getting it to work. Indirect competitors on that matter, we have hotels and municipalities, as well as private enterprises. And of course, universities and public enterprises, in having to think of the expansion side of the ordeal, on where universities, for once, will actually get on board in understanding, okay, preferably we'd have an option to get bicycles available rather than just moving across buses from campus A to campus B, from FNU 1 to FNU 2, from different mobilities across different campuses. We see that as a potential for a green sort of transport provider to come in. And that's where we see we'll have them as competitors as well in having to think, in having to gauge their growth in thinking for the future. And I understand that this is something that the University of the South Pacific is looking into. And I understand that the Fiji National University is looking into as well. in having to minimize the carbon footprint in sharing their fuel model. They're also looking into sharing this. So either way, again, we see them as indirect competitors in having to share the model. But again, we remain strong in having to get this off the ground, to make it as publicly accessible as possible. Why we choose to be different and why we are different is because not only that we are the first to do this in the country, it is very easy to set up. That is one of our biggest advantages in having to come up with a competitive advantage, is we're very easy to set up. Each model, from universities to tourist hotspots, can adopt the model. And it's very easy to say export a somewhat hybrid model if institutions are willing to hop in to support, to partner. You get your very own fleet. You get your very own provider for that. And not only, as I mentioned, we are the first in the market to do this, we will be able to lead it out. And as we've talked with Mr. Khan over the years in getting this done, we saw the potential in having to open up, markets. That's how we see our competitive advantage as being a gateway market to open up bicycle repair shops, to actually encourage the private sector come on board in having to open up more bicycles venture, in having to get into this green mobile last mile kind of solutions. And on the third and fourth advantages, we've seen that it is very well in line with our national development goal, how we're choosing to go about the Paris Agreement, how we're choosing to cut down emissions from a large sum amount to a very tiny bit in having to get it, grow. And, I digress in having to think about, in having to pitch and talk about this with a lot of investors and partners, that we have a very, very slim footprint, a carbon footprint across the Pacific. We are but yet one small inch of having to contribute to the large developed countries on how they emit global emissions. And I always answer this question by having to say that, if we're going to do something that's better for the future, why not? In having to think about how big you're offering, why don't you start an offer? And that's why we're here. And of course, our fourth advantage is, of course, the idea that I've shared in having to champion this green climate sort of way in having to tackle the transportation system. Moving on, the fact of the business of things, we are procuring our bicycles for the list of having to look at, sorry about that, around 700 Fiji dollars, which is around 350 US, from procuring our assets. And we understand this as a very big ask on our side as a startup. And that's why we've been reaching out for partnerships, and we've been reaching out to investors of having to see and actually forecast this as a potential future project for, say, bus companies, if they decide to having to hop out of the constant focus on having to focus on, okay, let's look at the fuel price. If a Consumer Council would like to hike it up, we'll, move this way. We thought of, okay, why not? If the fuel prices increase, then would you have an option of having green transport providers available to your doorsteps? That's how we're seeing how the money of things, the business of things are working. And especially when it comes up to investors, in having to look at our main target of having to acquire $100,000 Fiji or at least 50 bikes. This brings me to this particular point on our revenue model. Now we've adopted this, having to look at closely the Consumer Commission Council's taxi fare based system. And we've gone right to the deep end of having to understand that we can go as low as $1 to $3 per ride when this is available to the general public. And we'd very much be in par with how the bus system works in the country. And we very much want to have to be a part of that. In having to do that, we need the tourism. We need the baseline of having to inject our revenue to make that work. That's why we're focusing first on the tourism and university market to inject capital in having to get at least around 50 to 100 bikes for a pilot project in 6 months over the city. And we have subscription models that we've looked into in having to get our pricing models done. And we understand that this is going to work only when we partner with you and, of course, other statutory bodies. Our team is set up in 3 major streams. We have hardware and maintenance, tech and innovation, and policy and operations. I'm head of policy and operations, and we have our chief engineer who's on hardware and maintenance and tech and innovation. We are still looking at someone. We've talked with Soleh, a really nice guy who is Mr. Tukai, who is actually heading the Soleh program. We've asked for his help in heading the technology and innovation stream, simply because he's actually made the initiative, and he's actually done some sort of agreement with already made solutions. So we are welcoming Soleh to having to come on board with technology and innovation. And our steps from here on, I'm wrapping up. Our next step from here on is actually getting the bite samples that will be arriving this April. So we've talked to our supplier, and we're getting them on April, in having to do some sort of a pilot phase through April, probably a 6-month phase. And we've talked to our partners. I guess our team has reached out to USAID. We've got Triple GI Pacific, who's on board, as well as UNDP, Youth Collab. You'd be glad to actually know as well that we are both award winners for the Triple GA Pacific's award in green development, as well as the UNDP Youth Collab Top Innovative Award for the country and international as well. After acquiring the bites, we'd look to you and having to get Fiji Roads and our municipality councils to setting up bases and hotspots, and having to seal the market, as I've mentioned, over our Talano. And of course, our 3-year revenue stream, we'd reinvest all of that to getting our bike fleet on board, to get a solid, some sort of a solid foundation in having to make this work. That's it. That's our small pitch, a very brief pitch on why, how, what, where, when, and who Qaqi Mai is, and what we're forecasting for the future. And I guess wrapping up, I'm very, very much, as founder of this small enterprise, this small business, having to make this work, I'm very, very grateful and thankful to the Land Transport Authority, Mr. Khan, for having to guide us along these 5 years in getting here. And I thank you, the senior management, for LTA, in having to hear me through, pitch this little idea that we can both share towards the future. Pinaka.
Thank you very much for coming up with the initiative to present your proposal to Land Transport Authority. And as for your presentation, there are a lot of high-level visions that you are trying to incorporate into your business proposals, in terms of reducing carbon emissions, sustainable transportation mode, and traffic congestion is a big issue in Fiji. And also you raised something in terms of and this we've been discussing with our team. What is our future plans in terms of trying to mitigate or tackle this continuous rising of fuel costs? And we support, and we get the vision that you trying to incorporate into business proposal. And like through your discussions with Mr. Khan, these regulations that we have in front of us is quite archaic.
Yes, sir.
There's a need to be changed. And we are also in discussion with our line ministry in terms of policy directions. And if the stakeholders, government stakeholders, both directly and indirectly, they get their heads together in ensuring that this form of transportation mode, in terms of sustainable bicycle transportation mode. And this discussion has been happening since the publishing of the National Development Plan, 5 to 2 years. Inside the National Development Plans, all of these visions towards sustainability, environmentally friendly, reduction of carbon, they're all intertwined. I think our biggest challenge now is the infrastructure. And we also will need the input from Ministry of Economy. The Ministry of Finance.
No,
Because
sir.
they control the money. Yeah, if we just need to bring all the stakeholders together, you have the same mindset. All of these things is going to work. Okay.
No, sir.
And I'm so glad that we have somebody in the out there in the private sector who's already envisaging the step towards this. Eh? And
Yes, sir.
once again, thank you very much. And you have our support.
Yes, sir.
Our team will be pushing for this. Because at the
Yes,
end of the day, we are the ones who's answering to all of this. Eh?
Don't
How do
jaga.
we tackle?
Don't jaga.
Yeah, how do we tackle the traffic congestions? How do we tackle the non-availability of public service out there in the villages, out there in those areas where probably the road infrastructure is not that well established. Eh? Yeah.
Don't jaga. Don't know.
If
Don't
you
know.
come up with the idea to probably assist you, yeah. And I see a brighter future in front of us. Eh?
No, sir.
If all stakeholders just come together, we have the same answer. But like I said, we support the idea, we support the initiative, and
Exactly.
once again, probably another team, probably for any questions or clarifications from the team. Yeah.
Don't jaga. No, sir.
Eliki, just something that I think I forgot to ask you yesterday. Have you had a chance to discuss or present this to climate change in International Cooperation Division?
Yes, Mr. Khan. We are partners with Triple GI Pacific.
Yeah.
They've given us seed funding to establish the business, and they're also our expert mentors. We also have Mr. Andrew Irvin from. He's now an independent consultant, but he was with the Micronesian transport mobility sector and green growth. So these are both two very well-established consultants internationally that are on board with Qaqi Mai in having to make this work. And one of the biggest push that they've been, over and over, you have to get down to statutory bodies. You have to reach out to the main guys that are making this work. Only then can it work. And that's why I'm grateful for this meeting. And I understand that they will always be there to support us along the way.
So Mr. Kushal Raj, he's the acting head of CCICD, and now CCICD is under PM's office. Climate change minister responsible for climate change is PM. So it would be a very good idea to discuss with them because they could drive a lot of regulatory changes. They are well positioned. CCICD, one of their main functions, they are sort of the people responsible for the Climate Change Act.
Okay.
So Fiji's Climate Change Act is under them. So due to their powers under that act, they're in a very good position to drive some of the regulatory changes which would help this through. So
thank you, sir.
Probably,
thank you.
Yeah.
On the record, is there a possibility, Mr. Khan and gentlemen, is there a possibility to having our some sort of a gentleman handshake or some sort of a collaboration between Qaqi Mai and LTA in having to approach these bodies? Since I understand Mr. Finances has been stressing on the need for a collaborative sort of approach. Is there a possibility for having LTA to some sort of get us, since you are very well versed in how the government would be much honored to just hop in while you guys, set up the Talano, and we'd be very much on board in having LTA spearhead is some sort of a cooperative movement. Is there a possibility on that?
Yeah, Iliki, you have a support, probably from LT's perspective, together with this reduction in carbon emission, sustainable friendly transport, the road safety aspect. If you also can have that together with this, then we can sing from the same hymn song.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Because that's in terms of LTH factors, the overarching umbrella is road safety. If we can drive on that, all of these the reasons that are there, we totally support it.
Thank you. I was just sharing with Mr. Khan. You'd be glad to know that we spoke with Chief Fiji Roads. I think last 2 days. This is a very, very good forecast that the Fiji Roads has mapped out in having to forecast future bike lanes all across the country. But then again, to having to see where we are as a nation and how to see development, as you mentioned, is very true. And I just wanted to mention that the Fiji Roads Authority are also on board. They are big time supporters for the movement towards this. And I thank you for having to stress that how important this is for us, collectively as a whole to make it work. No value.
Handle Liliki, so
Nasa value.
we'll be in touch in the near future, and we look forward to for the correspondence.
Don Saka, Mr. Khan, thank you so much. The senior management of LTA, nasa valuable na senior Naganda, thank you so much for having to hear out my pitch and for Qaqi Mai to potential. And I guess we've formed a good relationship from here on. Thank you so much for making this work. Nasa value.
Thank you.
No,